The What Your Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Lauren and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show's for you. Hi, Christi. Welcome to What Your Next podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talking romance with you.
I am very excited to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I always say that when people ask, one of the words I use to describe myself is prolific. I've been writing really since grad school. I went to the University of Connecticut and I was a history ed major. And that's when I always knew that I wanted to write romance novels, but my path to publication wasn't necessarily the path that you necessarily think you're going to take. You know, I'd wanted to have the agent and, the traditional contract, and my path was definitely slower. And I ended up, my path it fell into it a little bit. I was on bed rest for 17 weeks with a really complicated twin pregnancy.
Oh my gosh.
And, and I started writing seriously when my son was born. And when he was born, I learned he had a disability. And so writing books are an escape for all of us. I was in a position financially where I couldn't afford books. So I used my libraries and I wrote my own books, and it was very therapeutic. But I never did anything with them. I was still kind of just trying to pursue that traditional path, and until I was on bed rest. And so at that point, I was really bored, and I had had watched an episode of Say Yes to the Dress. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but Valerie Bowman, who's a Regency romance author, was on, and she was picking out her wedding dress. And if you haven't seen that episode, it's a great one
Now I need to look for that episode.
I love Valerie. So I was watching it, and and she's like, I'm a romance author. And I'm like, and it jogged it. And I had just binged a lot of TV because there's, only so much you could do. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, hey, I have all these books on my computer. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll just publish them and, indie publish and see, and, maybe I'll find a reader. And and I ended up, my first book in my series had ended up hitting the USA Today bestseller list. And then I never stopped writing. And so I'm, more than 70 books in. And so, about a few years after that, Montlake Romance, which is an arm of Amazon Publishing, reached out and asked if I'd like to do a series with them. And then I did that. And so only recently I have just had my first experience in the more traditional, New York sphere with my All the Duke's Sin series, which is mass market published, and really exciting because, you always dream to hold your book in your hand. And it was nice to be able to go into a store and see it on the shelf and have my daughters there with me to see it too. And, and kind of like come full circle.
Yeah, and you're in the Berkeley family, so so I love that. Oh my gosh, I love this idea. Honestly, just seeing that show and that trigger to say hey, let me give this a try, because maybe this route did not work right now. It can work eventually. You just never know. It's just take one action. Just follow the crumbs. That's why I like to say it. Follow the breadcrumbs. It'll lead you to where you need to go next.
Yes, I love that. That's great.
So let's chat about you're a prolific writer. So how do you manage it all? How do you write? Do you write all the time? What's your schedule looks like?
So, if you had asked me pre-pandemic what my schedule had looked like, life had been more standard normal of what we thought life looked like. And so my girls had been in preschool and in school, and my son was in school. So I would work all day. When I dropped them off, I would work the traditional school day, and then I'd work at night too. And when they went to bed, and it was, I was writing 10 or 12 hour days. And I love to write. So it's not it's not, for me, it's not sitting down, it's a chore. I enjoy what I do. And it's, I always say that, if you're I think of myself more as a storyteller kind of than, and author, like there's always just, it's, there's stories everywhere kind of for me. And so, but when the pandemic hit, my kids are home, and, we're in a position of teaching 3 children at home. And like I mentioned, 2 of my children have special needs, and 1 is severely disabled. So there was no, there's no respite, and there's no, so I had to kind of go through this evolution and a shift. So there were several authors. One of my, we call it accountability partner, is her name is LaQuette, and she's a contemporary romance author, and very similar, a mom as well. And we started writing, started at night, and then, your day is just so full. So we created a new schedule where we would set our alarms and write at 4:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning. So every day I wake up, at 4, and I will write until about 7:30 while my kids are sleeping. And in that time, I've learned that I'm more productive just with those few short hours as opposed to the 10 to 12, because the house is so quiet, because nothing has happened in the news cycle. I mean, well, everything's always happening, but it's not like, there's kind of this process before the world catches fire every time, the time that it usually does during the normal 9 to 5, 9 to 9 kind of shift. So, it's just quiet. There's no noise. There's just nothing. There's just this great silence. And it's been really, it really feeds the muse. There's just your thoughts. And, it's not like emails to respond to at that time necessarily, because, most people aren't sending emails at 4 in the morning. And so, yeah, so that's really my writing schedule now. And I do it daily. I really committed to, like, I adjusted my life a lot with, put a lot of, life in perspective. And, and my weekends I give to my, my family. And, unless I'm on deadline and, I have edits that I have to turn in, I try not to really work on the weekend unless, my kids have something that like they have to do for school, and then I'll sit and we'll kind of work together like that if it's something that I could do for. But no, I could pretty much just, that's my week, and it's rigorous. Like that's my schedule, that's my routine, and it works, and I don't waver, and I write a lot of words, like 4,000 words a day.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
What peace and quiet can do.
Yeah. With peace and quiet, and just like not having any distractions, like just removing the distraction and just be like, just write it, like get it out.
Completely. And then the other, I think it's the Pomodoro method was, and I had never heard of it really until I'd started, working with my critique partners, or the writing accountability partners. But it's, you're on for 25 minutes, you're off for 5 minutes. So that's also been so helpful, because I can still go on social media, but I know when that 5 minutes are up, we're like, okay, back to it. And, and reporting, how many words did you do? And it's not a competition. It's just, again, it's putting out that it's there, that I, accountability, and
So I got a question, because I've interviewed a lot of indie authors who were in the regular contemporary dark, very niche market, but historical romance is like, it's not as wide in indies, So what was the experience being an indie with historical romance, like promoting, marketing, because you get to do the whole work,
It's a lot. So it's, I didn't really appreciate just how much work the indie publishing was until I was with a publisher who, coordinates all the pieces and the details of, the cover and, the book blurb. Like, I'd rather write 100,000 word book than write a 250-page blurb for the back of my book. Like, there's an email sitting there, my editor's like, I just need the quick blurb. And I'm like, I'd rather just send you the whole book that's almost done right now. But, so for indie publishing, it's everything. And at first it's all I knew. So it's, kind of, and so the that work day is is a lot because, you're responsible for your blog tours and you're responsible for your marketing. Um, but there's also something freeing in that too, because you have control of it too. So it's these trade-offs. And for me, I enjoy both. So that's why hybrid really works for me. But it's work.
Yeah, it's work. It's a lot of like, it's just like a day to day. Like you're gonna manage all the different logistics, manage
Yeah.
all the different, all the
Right.
different parts and pieces,
Right, because it's not just edits, right? So it's,
Yeah,
it's developmental edits, and then it's, it's a
the
second round
proofread.
of dev edits, and then it's the proofread, and then it's the copy, right? So there's just so many stages of editing with just, within that. And it's not like you use the same person for each editorial stage, right? You have different proofreaders. And so coordinating all those schedules and, making sure that you are on the books, and then, and you I'm trying to find wood to knock on, but like missing deadlines is not something that I do. And, it's something that I've really prided myself on, and, making sure that my books are turned in. And, sometimes you can't help life, I've had really times that it's been challenging. But, with indie publishing, you are working with contracted people who are relying on your income as well. So it's, being respectful of these editors whom you're working with. And, so you can't necessarily say, hey, do I, like that they have their schedule in the same way. So it kind of requires, maybe that's kind of why I never thought about it, but why I have committed to these, deadlines, because the people that you're working with are relying on you to do that too, because
Yeah.
otherwise your book doesn't get edited. And
And then it delays, and then
right,
and then you'll hear from readers and be like, "Where's my book?"
exactly, right, and they will, right,
It's not the money. It's just like you get the readers here, like, "Where's my book? I
right,
don't understand. You owe me a book."
yes, and like disappointing readers is like one of, obviously the last thing that we don't want disappointed readers. We
Yeah.
love that people are excited and passionate about our worlds, and letting them down is never something that we want to do, ever.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Desperately Seeking a Duchess. Tell us the elevator pitch.
All right. So, so Cortland is, so of just overview of the series. So all the Duke's sins, the way that I pitched it when I was presenting it to Berkeley is imagine if you had the Bridgertons, but they were all illegitimate. And, it's this very close family, and they're from a mining town. And so, a lot of my books, most of my books are reflective of my experience. I talked often about, my family struggled with poverty, and we were, when my son was born and we lost, we had to lose it. We lost our home, and we really struggled, and we relied on charities and family. And so my books are very much characters. It's, I always say it's the fairy tale, but, it's the fairy tale for the people who are, who've struggled, who have survived, abuse or, assault, or who's, soldiers with PTSD and working class characters. And so in this case, it's the Audley family, and they're miners. And so it's this merger of this family who's had no idea, no intention of ever entering polite society, who suddenly finds themselves thrust into this, glittering, world that is so different than what they've known. And the idea that they don't want to necessarily be part of that world. And so with this particular book, the heroine, Kaylin, this is something that we had talked about, when I was talking with my editor, and, when it was in development, is that, people say, oh, well, she could be a duchess, right? Why would she, she lives in a mining town and the hero of the book is a duke. So doesn't that match automatically make sense? Isn't that something that, but then you looked at, the coming from her working class station,